This song is called On Impulse by Animals as Leaders. And to this day, it's probably one of my favorite songs that Tosin Abasi has written because it combines so many different styles of guitar playing. It combines classical finger-picking style along with jazz harmony, along with elements of progressive rock, the way it switches between meters and time signatures throughout the whole piece. And it was one of the first songs I ever heard that truly used the entire range of the 7-string guitar. So today I wanted to go over just the first riff of the song, the part that sounds like this. Up until there. First, I'm going to split this riff in half, and we're only going to focus on the first half. Just up until there. This first half of the riff, if I were to boil it down to its simplest form, it would pretty much just be a very long, extended A major 7 chord. Pretty much the entire riff, if you analyze all of its notes and if you know your modes really well, every single note comes directly from A Ionian, which is just the A major scale, or it could also be A Lydian. We actually don't have enough information to tell whether it's one or the other because he never plays that D sharp, which would definitely make it sound Lydian. I'm going to assume that this song is in Lydian mode, and I'm going to actually take this verse shape that Tosin Abasi plays. It's a very cool chord. You have an open A string, you have the 6th fret on D, G, and then you're going to also press down the 7th fret on the B string. And it has a lot of fourths in it, which is always makes nice chords. And then he just directly slides down and uses pretty much the same exact shape, but just down a whole step. So now, while I was messing around with those chord shapes, I thought, what if I just took that through the notes that I know are in Lydian mode, using the same exact shape throughout the whole thing, and then you get all these other cool chords. So all I'm doing is, you can actually think of the spacing between these chords as being like a pentatonic scale. You have, I'll start on the 6th fret D here. We got 6th fret D. You're going to maintain the same shape with your left hand, slide up all the way so that your first finger is now on the 9th fret. Then slide that up a whole step. Slide it up another whole step. Then slide it up 3 more frets. And if you go up another whole step, you're back on the notes you started with, but an octave higher. So right away, this is very useful for comping, or by comping, I mean accompanying, as in if you're playing rhythm guitar over somebody else who's playing the lead, like a saxophone player or another guitar player or whatever. If your job is just to play chords and the entire band is focusing on an A major kind of sound, especially an A major 7 kind of sound, you can just take these chord shapes and kind of slide around wherever you want, as long as you're hitting those specific frets that I'm talking about. All of them sound good as long as you know where they are. And then you could start learning them over different kinds of keys, like you can start playing it over D. Or if you just ditch that open note entirely, if you know you're in the key of like, let's say we just go up a half step to B flat. Not only are they're useful for chords, but if you are taking a solo and you know in your key of A major, or A Lydian specifically, you can also make melodies out of these. For that entire thing, I was basically just messing around with only notes that exist within these chord shapes that we went over. So the first thing I did was I kind of arpeggiated every one of those. And then a little bit later, I started trying to kind of mix up the notes a little bit. And then you can also add some chromatic movement in there. Like one thing I played was this. And as long as you're landing at the end of that run, of any chromatic run really, as long as you're ending it on a note that's in one of these chord shapes, you're going to be fine. Now the second half of that riff, we're going to focus on, that's the part that sounds like this. First, this part of the riff sounds exactly identical to the part I played previously, but the time where it changes, when we get to this F natural note right here. If I were to do a rough analysis of this entire section from the point where we have different notes, from the point we get to this F specifically, we go through what's basically a C sharp major triad. That's the third root, fifth. We jump up to the third an octave higher and go down a diminished triad, jump all the way up to this high A, fifth fret on the E string. We go down an augmented triad. And then this note right here, A on the D string, slides down to the sixth fret of a D string, and then we pretty much end up on a C sharp 7 chord. If I were to do the same thing as I did with the previous section and boil all that down to just one chord, that entire section would just be C sharp 7. Those three types of chords, augmented chords, diminished chords, and dominant seventh chords, all have one thing in common, and that's that they generally have a sound that tends to want to pull the listener's ear in another direction. So what I mean by that is, I can give you an example here. The most common example of using this kind of dominant sound is in a 2-5-1. So in this case, the dominant chord I'm going to play is the second chord of the sequence. Now, say I just played the first two chords, and that was it. Generally, that leaves kind of like an unsatisfying feeling, right? Like our ear wanted the sound to go somewhere else. It's because the dominant chord directs the sound back to A major, which is what we established is the key of the song. I could also replace it with a diminished chord. I use two diminished seventh chords, but it's the same concept. And I can also replace it with an augmented chord. It's like different flavors of that same kind of pulling your ear in another direction kind of sound. The chord that I've been playing this whole time as the dominant seventh chord has been an E dominant 7. Tosin Abasi instead plays a C sharp 7 chord. So now we have to think, why exactly does he choose C sharp 7? Generally, we would think that the E7 would be the one that would want to go to A. Here's another interesting concept. Let's play a D diminished 7 chord. If you don't know this shape, it is second finger, which is the middle finger, on the 5th fret of A, 6th fret of D, 4th fret of G, 6th fret of B. All together, you have a diminished 7th chord. Now, one interesting relationship between diminished 7th and dominant 7th chords is that if we take any one of these notes and move it down a half step, we get a dominant 7th chord. And just to show you what that's like, let's take the root, the D right here, and move it down a half step. So now I have a 4th fret on A instead of 5th fret. That's a dominant 7th chord. That's the C sharp dominant 7th chord. Now go back to diminished 7. Take the ring finger note, the note on the next string, bring that down 1 fret. That's a G dominant 7th chord. All right, bring that note back up. Take this pointer finger note on the 4th fret of G, bring it down a half step. Now we have a B flat dominant 7th chord. You can tell they sound exactly the same. And then last one, let's take the pinky note, bring that down a half step. And that's the E dominant 7, which happens to be the dominant 7 that typically pulls our ear back to A major. With all 4 of these chords, you can actually replace this E dominant 7 with any one of those 3 other chords, and it's going to have that same exact kind of gravitational pulling your ear into the A major sound effect. So if I play again, this is 2-5-1 with the E7, just like we heard before. Now I'm going to replace E7 with C sharp 7. That's the kind of sound Tosna Bossi is going for in On Impulse. Next, I'm going to replace it with G7. Very different kind of sound there. And lastly, we have B flat 7. And on top of that, each one of those dominant 7th chords can also go into other key centers. So you can also use it for a tool for modulation. And there's just so much more that you can get into with this stuff as a songwriter or composer. Those are the main 2 things that I kind of took away from learning On Impulse on guitar for the last few weeks. And that was a lot of fun. I think I'll take a few other songs that I really enjoy listening to at the moment and kind of dissect them and see if there's any kind of teaching moments in them as well. Or if anyone's interested in hearing more of this song On Impulse, because there's so much more to this song than just that opening riff, I'd be interested in doing that as well. But otherwise, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this.